Hello there, this is John, and this is Chapter 4 Documentation. So, every time you come into contact with a patient, you're going to fill out a patient care report. This is a legal document and it has a number of really important functions. Some are to protect us legally, some are to protect your company, and of course, to help the patient get their care that they need. So first function of this is what's called continuity of care. So you're arrive on scene and you have a patient, they're sick or injured. You're probably the very first person that might encounter them. You might see things, witness things. You might actually hear things from bystanders about what happened. You're going to document that in your documentation. Your document goes into the patient's permanent record, and days, months, years later, a physician can recall that document, read what you wrote, and maybe get a better understanding of what went on that event, and maybe find a better way of treating the patient because of that. This is an official record of the call or the event. And like I said, it does become a part of the patient's permanent medical record, but it's also used for billing purposes. Now, every agency, whether it's public or private, bills patients for transport, depending on the circumstances. So it's really important that we obtain as much billing information as possible, just for a couple of reasons. One, your company or department does make money from this. So if you have really good, accurate billing information, it makes it a lot easier for them to bill, to make money. And of course, if they make money, you get paid. So it's win-win in that respect, right? Also, you might not think of this, but if you're a sick or injured person and you get transported to the hospital and you get sent home and you're recovering, probably the last thing you're going to want to do is to deal with insurance. So if you can obtain, as an EMT, if you can obtain as much information as possible about their billing and about their insurance, then your company or department will bill their insurance company directly, and hopefully they won't have to bother the patient. So it really does help in that way. As you upload this information to the cloud and go to your department and all that, the County of San Diego also draws off data from this. They use it for trending and statistics so that they can see how well the protocols are going and what kind of changes might be needed in the future. This is, again, like I said, a legal document, and it can be subpoenaed, and you can be subpoenaed as a witness in a court of law. So it's really important when you get up on that stand to testify that what you're saying is backed up by what's in your documentation. So again, it's really, really important to do good, thorough documentation, because it might just protect you legally, and it might help someone else in a court of law because you've done such a great job. And every agency, whether it's public or private, it could be the fire department, could be just a private ambulance service, they're required to have what's called medical oversight. And this is going to be either a physician or nurse coordinator who is going to read your documentation. They're going to review it for accuracy, they're going to review it for protocols and all that stuff. And if they see negative trends, things that aren't being done, or you're not documenting things correctly, or your documentation isn't as complete as they would like based on their criteria, they'll have you come in and they'll talk to you and they'll give you some retraining on this. So it's important as well to make sure you do a really good job. Now, patient care reports. Luckily for you guys, since probably about 9 or 10 years ago, the state of California, they've mandated everything is now online. It's all computerized. It's all cloud-based. So you go out there on an ambulance or even a fire truck, you're going to have a tablet, maybe a Toughbook or an iPad, to have some software in it. Makes it a lot easier. Obviously, there's pull-down menus. There's check boxes and all that great stuff. So it makes it a lot easier for even things like spell check and everything like that. Now, just for some clarification, you might have seen this document already on Canvas in the course shell, or maybe in the lab. This is called a pre-hospital run sheet. And if you think about what this really is, this is a cheat sheet Imagine you're in class, I'm lecturing and you're taking notes. This is a note-taking device. So what you do with this is while you're on scene with the patient, yourself, your partner, or maybe even the captain could be filling this out for you. Once you're at the hospital, you would take this cheat sheet and you would then use the information on here and you transfer it to your pre-hospital run sheet. So this right here in front of you, this is not a legal document. This gets destroyed at the hospital, but it all gets transferred over to a patient care report. This is just a pretty common design. Again, there's pull down menus, there's fill in the blanks, there's check boxes and all that. It's all electronic, like I was saying. Now, what every PCR needs is all this stuff. And a lot of it's just self-explanatory because as you're filling this out top to bottom, you're going to fill in your unit number, your name, your partner's name, your ID number, the date of the call, where the call was located, the times that the call occurred during, and all that stuff. You're going to get billing information about the patient, their address, their name, their date of birth, all that stuff. You're going to document in various fields your assessment findings. This will be vital signs, skins, lung sounds, those types of things. A lot of this is pull down menu. A lot of this is checkbox. Pretty straightforward. And of course, in the treatment, you're going to have fields where you can fill out what medications you provided and also what interventions you provided. There's also a narrative. It's called an I-chart narrative, and I-chart is the format in which the County of San Diego wants us to write our written narratives on the call. And this is what I-chart stands for: incident, chief complaint, history, assessment, treatment, or RX. And I'm sure you've gone to pharmacies and you've seen RX over the door. It's just an abbreviation of treatment or medication, that type of thing. And of course, transport. What was the outcome of this? They want you to do this in this order, and what you would do is you'd write a sentence, a couple of sentences, or possibly even a full paragraph or more in the context of each of these sections to provide you a good, clear, and concise narrative portion. I'll show what it looks like. So this is a sample of what should be in each field, going with incident, chief complaint, history, assessment, RX, and transport. So the incident is really simple. Usually it's where you were called and what you called for. Could be a simple line like you see here. Chief complaint, of course, is what and the reason why this person called out today, whatever it might be. Could be a twisted ankle, could be chest discomfort. History is the subjective portion of this. This is what you were told about the event, what the family told you, what the first responders told you, and you're just going to kind of summarize this in maybe, I don't know, maybe a paragraph or so, like you see here. You can read through this, obviously. Assessment is the objective portion. This is what you found when you did your assessment. So you always want to state how you found the patient and what's their orientation and how are they sitting or laying down or whatever it might be. Their actual position you found them in is important to write in as well. You also want to fill out things like, there was no scars, there was no trauma, they have a angulation to the arm. Whatever you found, if you can physically look at, physically measure, you're going to put it into the assessment portion. The treatment portion or the RX portion is simply what you've done for the patient and how they've responded to them. Now you'll notice in this category, I did put in what I provided to the patient, but I did not put the doses or the times that I provided the medications. Those are all going to be down in the medication fields down below. So if someone's reading this document and they want to look and see when you gave the nitro, they can look down below in the page, a couple pages down, and they'll find it. We really don't want to put times. We don't want to put numbers like blood pressures. We don't want to put doses into our narrative because we're doing it elsewhere. And what happens sometimes is if you put your vital signs or your medication doses into your narrative, and then you put them again in the fields down below, there can be discrepancies. So maybe you up top you have one number and down below you have another number and they don't jive, and that's a big problem if you do go to court. So we don't want duplication because it does cause discrepancies. So what you see here is totally acceptable. Finally, the transport is what happened. Was the person transported? Was it AMA? Was it a dead at scene? Also, what happened during the transport? Did the person change in any way? Did the person get better, get worse? Also, when you get to the hospital, you want to list their personal belongings and you want to state who you turn the patient over to. So this is a pretty straightforward, very simple sample chart. I will post this in the actual module so you'll be able to use this as a reference. So from my experience, these are my golden rules of filling out a patient care report. For me, and of course, this is easy for you now because it's all cloud-based and it's all software-based and all that. But when you're done with your patient care report and you're about ready to submit it to the cloud for your company or department, you should reread the whole thing and make sure there's no spelling errors, there's no syntax errors, or even content errors. Like maybe the wrong dose, you wrote down the wrong dose or the wrong time or something. Make sure it's all aligned and everything's looking great. If it isn't, then fix it. You should have at least 2 sets of vital signs minimum on every single patient care report. If for some reason you're unable to obtain some or all of the vital signs, or only 1 set and not 2 sets or more, explain why in your narrative. Patient refused, patient said he didn't want it to be touched, or there's maybe a contamination issue where they have some kind of bed bugs on them. You didn't want to physically touch the patient. So just document it in your narrative. And then read your story, read your narrative, and does it make any sense? What I always have done in my career is I came up with this 5-year test. And the reason why I did this is because if you get called into court about something, whether as a witness or being sued, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 years after the call occurred. So I ask myself, I reread my PCR and I say, hey, in 5 years, if I read this again, would I understand what went on that day at that time? And if I say no, I'm going to rewrite it and make it clearer for me, because this is what's going to happen. It's happened to me. I've gone to court a number of times as a witness, and good, strong, valid documentation really helps you a lot. Make sure your times all match up with your treatments and vital signs. Make sure everything is within the context of the call. Imagine if you arrived at scene at 11:35 and your first set of vital signs isn't until 12:30. You can see there's a big issue here. And of course, we'll talk more about lying by omission a little bit later, but essentially just don't lie. Don't say you did something, or if you did something, you should document it. And of course, we have these approved abbreviations, and they're in the S102 in your protocol book. Those are the only ones you would use for the county when you're doing your narrative portion. So legal stuff. So you already know that you're going to go to the hospital. You're going to turn this patient over to a doctor or a nurse. You're going to get their signature and name, and they're going to sign. And again, you're going to get those patient belongings seen to and taken care of and all that. And the way it works here in California is when you're done getting all your signatures and your PCR is done, you hit the button and it goes to the cloud. And then the hospital can pull it down from the cloud and make a copy of it. They can even read it as you're as you're typing it into your iPad or your Toughbook while you're driving to the hospital. It's popping up on their screen. They can actually read what's going on as you're going to the hospital. So it's actually a pretty cool system. So lastly with all this is when it comes to making mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes, they're honest mistakes. You give too much of a medication. Maybe your treatment was somehow in error. Number one thing is do not try to hide it. Once the call is over, before your next call while you're still at the hospital, you're going to call your supervisor, you're going to call your medical director, and you're going to report what happened. And they'll tell you what to do about your documentation. So what usually happens with this, because there is a legal aspect to this. Let's say you gave double the dose of nitroglycerin by mistake, which obviously should never happen, but things do happen, right? And so consequently, what they're probably going to have you do, and this is going to vary from agency to agency, just follow what your agency tells you to do, but they'll have you fill out your patient care report very factually. They'll have you actually document the amount of medications you did provide, even though it was an error. And then on a separate document, that's called an addendum, they're going to have you describe what happened and why it happened. They're going to keep these two documents separate. The reason why this is if this call does go to court and the patient's lawyer does subpoena your medical record, your patient care report, all they're going to get is the patient care report that you wrote out. They're not going to get the addendum. It's a separate document. So that's usually the way they want you to do it. If you work in another state where they're still using paper and pen doing these PCRs, if you do make a mistake, like you put down the wrong number or you misspell a word, just put a single line through, initial it, and then correct that afterward. And when it comes to patient care, document what was done, and don't try to falsify stuff. Like, let's say for instance you gave nitroglycerin and the blood pressure was 98 by palpation, but you wanted to give nitro, so you wrote 102. So you don't do that kind of stuff. It just, whatever the pressure is, go by that. But don't try to just move things around to make things work out the way you want them to do. So I think we're actually done here.